The other week, a friend sent me a message referring to an old video of mine. Because of his message, I became keen on rewatching that video, and so a couple minutes later, I was sucked into a state of procrastination, watching my old videos from the very beginning of this channel. I'm assuming the least of you know, but I began uploading videos to this channel about 4.5 years ago. And back then, it started with clips from my time in Japan in the summer of 2016. And it was right around then that I also became increasingly interested in videography. And so I found myself sitting at the table watching my old stuff on my phone, and I came to notice a common theme throughout my doodles back then. They were all strongly experimental, and I didn't seem to hesitate to do all sorts of weird things in my videos. This got me thinking about how freely I used to create and how experimental my creative output was, especially in comparison to what I do nowadays. After sharing my initial thoughts with my friend, he wrote this. And that is this video. So, in this essay, I want to share the thoughts on this topic I've collected and try to find some kind of a conclusion for me to examine whether these thoughts can be transformed into creative energy. So, let me begin by explaining my observations and self-reflective thoughts. While watching my old videos, I accumulated multiple factors I would like to point out, which I think are decent hints to demonstrate what I mean here. So let's begin with my obvious inexperience in videography or any visual art form back then. I was at the start of the learning curve and just wanted to try out everything there is. I was quite limited in resources, and in the videos I seemed to simply embrace that and create videos with this trashy amateur look, although I find trashy to be the incorrect adjective. For me, trashy implies something bad, but in this case I think the video shows this intentional amateur aesthetic. I remember that I was heavily influenced by a creator I watched on YouTube back then. She had this amazing way of visualizing her videos in this amateurish aesthetic but still keeping it enjoyable. She embraced the imperfections and supposed mistakes in her videos, which expressed a deeply personal feeling and a sort of authenticity in her videos. I don't know how much of this was her intention and what amount was coincidental and a result of simply not trying hard to create the best possible video, best in a conventional sense, but I clearly remember that I truly enjoyed the style of her videos. They had their own personal character, and I believe that I was trying to adopt that for myself. Another point I would like to mention is my strong influence from music. I had found my taste of music and mainly appreciated it for its emotionality. It evoked such strong feelings in me, and so naturally I oftentimes pulled creative inspiration out of the music I listened to for my videos. Therefore, if you look at the first videos of this channel, you'll find a few unofficial music videos or simple video skits for specific songs I had carefully chosen. There's one genre I was listening to which I want to highlight: Vaporwave. In case you don't know, Vaporwave is an art genre found both in music and visual artworks. The main characteristics of the Vaporwave visuals are the retro aesthetics stemming from the 70s, 80s and 90s. The visuals are colourful, but mostly concentrating on pink and teal colours. Popular visual effects seen in this style are glitches, shapes, grids, the aesthetic of 90s computer hardware, and a heavily altered reality. When observing a piece of Vaporwave art, I've come to notice a common use of stacking multiple photos on top of each other and overlaying images. Now let's revert to my old videos, and you will easily recognize that I was at a total high of adapting these visual techniques in my videos. Without any consideration of copyright, I downloaded a pretty large gallery of Vaporwave art, especially animations, which I then simply layered on top of my footage. My footage consisted of old videos from trips or videos I recorded using my dad's DSLR. To mix everything together a bit smoother, I often edited my footage visually to suit the Vaporwave aesthetic. At least a bit. So enough Vaporwave for now. In those videos, I found that I basically just tried out all sorts of ways to alter my visuals. This was sometimes rather conventional, as seen in this video, in which I enjoyed the use of my mobile phone's light, but other times I tried more abstract techniques such as overlaying printed text or a drawing on my footage. Another aesthetic technique I seemed to enjoy was the simulation of old, outdated media, mostly the characteristics of cassette tape videos. So I think I've covered most of the experimental art techniques I was into that age. Next I want to elaborate on what I felt when watching these and why I think this is so intriguing and also thought-provoking at the same time. While watching my old creations, I primarily felt a sense of nostalgia and warmth, which I guess is fairly expectable. But another feeling I could sense was this awe for my carelessness and intuitiveness in those videos. I can remember that these videos were just me playing around with the tools I had to create things that looked cool for me at the time. The videos remind me of my way of creating back then, which has changed a lot. I'm intrigued by how random yet careful the videos come across to me. I'm also fascinated by the freedom I gave myself in these videos. I think what I was doing in those days can be summarized as experimentation without expectations. Instead of being overly thoughtful to make the best work possible, I just did it. I just made something, whatever. And I didn't seem to fear shame for creating something stupid or bad. I just created without thinking of the end result and simply letting it come to me instead of looking for it. What I find so admirable about my way of creating then is that I was being led by my feelings and my intuition instead of adult rationality and thoughtfulness. So this poses the question, how has that changed? How is it now? That's actually not so easy to tell, but what I've definitely identified is that it is different. And different isn't necessarily bad, but in this case, unfortunately, I would not call it good. I realized that nowadays I'm more restrictive in what I do. I concentrate strongly on the specific thing I do, in my case that's photography and my style of photography. I feel much more fearful of creating bad art, something that's not up to my standards. In contrast, 4 years ago, I didn't have any such standards to achieve because I was only starting out. Consequently, the art I produce is much less experimental now, and when it does happen to become experimental, I feel this tension and concern contemplating the quality of the art. So after watching my old videos and then letting my head circle around these thoughts, I then wondered, why does this creatively adventurous way of experimenting fade? Is it only me? Or have other creatives also experienced the loss of their experimental side? How is this for you? My current assumption is that I've found something specific that I've narrowed myself down to and now concentrate on, consequently not experimenting with a wide range of creative expression. I've found something to stick to and practice this intensively, thus enabling a strong amplification in that specific exercise. An inevitable side effect within this process is the loss of everything else. This doesn't necessarily mean complete loss, but definitely a decrease. So this raises the next question, which I think is highly relevant. If I've found something to stick to and concentrate on, which strengthens that specific thing, but simultaneously narrows the variety in my expression, is this progress or self-confinement? If you're hoping for an answer, I can't give you one, because I don't know. I just think these are interesting thoughts and I'm curious to know your opinion, so if you have any thoughts, please feel encouraged to share them in the comments for the community to read. So despite my lack of an answer, my thoughts on this topic continued further. Given the fact that, in my case at least, my experimentation without expectations has faded and I rarely find myself creating anything visual as experimental as 4 years ago, I've begun to debate the following question. If I would intentionally embrace more experimentation again, would it change my art? And if so, positively? Again, I don't have an answer, and so I guess the only way to find out is to try out more experimental art again. Simply by researching the characteristics of Vaporwave for this video, I felt this desire to try that kind of art myself instead of just downloading other artists' work and throwing it all together. Recently, I've also discovered an interest for photographic collages, which ironically is a way of throwing stuff together, I suppose. So I'm currently thinking about a way to create time for this kind of experimental activity. That sounds kind of suspicious, but I just mean time to create experimental art. I'm currently so occupied with the work I'm already doing that I don't exactly know when I can do this, but at the moment a lot of my time is going into the preparations for a 10-day long shoot in April for my short film. But possibly, as soon as that is done, I might have a chunk of extra time which I could at least partially dedicate to intentional experimentation. I imagine this could have some positive effects on me personally, my creativity, and my art. I'm just so intrigued by how freely I created back then and would love a return of at least a little bit of that intuitiveness. So, those were my thoughts on this topic. I hope you enjoyed this video and I could get some thoughts to spin in your head. As said, I want to encourage you to comment your own thoughts so that we can create this exchange among the community. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a like, that would help out the channel to grow. Consider subscribing if you haven't yet, and I'll hopefully see you again next week in the next video. Until then, goodbye.